The Life Divine by Sri Aurobindo, Book 2. Hello, this is Chris speaking, Shores of Infinity, with another video about Sri Aurobindo's The Life Divine. Some time ago I've started to undertake the monumental task of summarizing Sri Aurobindo's The Life Divine and the Synthesis of Yoga, chapter by chapter. I have already finished summarizing the first part, the first book of the Life Divine, comprised of 28 chapters. Now here I will start with Book 2, Part 1, Chapter 1, Indeterminates, Cosmic Determinations in the Indeterminable. But first, before I start, I will do this differently this time. I have realized, looking back, that although I have tried to make these summaries as simple as possible, they were not. In fact, they were not. They were not as easy to follow as I thought. They were much simpler than the book. But for someone who hasn't read the book, very difficult to follow. So this time I will not go according to the book. I will summarize them completely spontaneously out of my head, without looking into the book, without trying to refer too much to the parts, the juicy parts of the chapters, to make it even more simple. During the first book, the first 28 chapters, Sri Aurobindo explained all the basics. What is life? What is the divine? What is Satchitananda? What is consciousness? What is matter? And so on. So now he goes even into more detail. He has laid out the basics for us, explained all the important terms, and now he really starts. And he starts with a quote, a very good quote of the Mandukya Upanishad, which says, "The unseen with whom there can be no pragmatic relations, unseizable, featureless, unthinkable, undesignable by name, whose substance is the certitude of oneself, in whom world existence is stilled, who is all peace and bliss, that is the self, that is what must be known." So what must be known is the unknowable, the indescribable, the featureless, the unthinkable, that which is beyond our capacity to think. Later he calls it supra-rational. It's beyond the ratio, beyond the mind. And yet, for some paradox reason, we can grasp it. We just have to use another faculty that is not our mind. And we have to link up to something that is not our mind, which is, of course, the supermind, the supramental. Somehow we human beings have the theoretical capacity, the potential capacity to link up to the supermind. And the supermind is something beyond creation. Yeah? The creation is part of the overmind. But the supermind is beyond that. So once we link up to the supermind, there is a possibility to understand what life is and what creation is. Although understanding is not the correct word, but we don't have any other term. He says there's a consciousness force everywhere inherent in existence, acting even when concealed, is the creator of the worlds, the occult secret of nature. So there's an occult secret of nature, a hidden secret of nature, which can be rediscovered in the material world. But the material world has two aspects, a knowledge aspect and an ignorance aspect, or a force of knowledge and a force of ignorance. Even more so than ignorance, it's an inconscience, or even a nescience, and not knowing anything, an absence of knowledge, and an absence of consciousness. So it's not about good versus evil here. Yeah? It's about consciousness versus inconsciousness. And those are two aspects, two forces of the same thing. Those are two coins of the same thing, of the indescribable, that has manifested in the form of our material world, in what we call the overmind. And this overmind is superior to the three forms that usually govern life: the gross, the vital, and the mental, or the physical, the subtle, and the causal, how they're also called. So now, first we have these three worlds, then the overmind, then the supermind, then Satchitananda. And beyond Satchitananda, there's no possibility to describe what is there. We like to call it a being, or energy, or thing, or divine, or God, but it's not a being. Even if Sri Aurobindo sometimes calls it being, it doesn't mean that it is a being like you or me, or a tree or a dog or whatever. What it is pure existence, pure consciousness, pure force. Although to assign names or terms like consciousness or force or existence is already one step down, that is Satchitananda, that is already trying to pin it down, but it's not down pinnable. It's like a void, a blank slate on which anything can be written. It's what we see is only phenomena. It's not the real thing. There is some kind of superstructure, but that is only apparent so for us, because we need to grasp something, to understand something, to talk about something, to think about something. We need a structure. So we assume there is a structure. So anything that we try to understand or explain, we influence by creating some sort of structure, which is of course limiting, and the thing we are trying to understand is limitless, it's infinite. It is indeterminate and indeterminable. That's why this is the title of this chapter. It's a supra-rational mystery, and we give it the name nature. That what we can perceive, we give it the name nature. Sometimes we give it the name matter or energy, but nature is more all-encompassing. We could also give it other names, like the divine, or Maya, or the great eagle, or whatever, the great all-father, and so on. But usually all the names we give it, this only describes it until the overmind, not beyond. Same, of course, the great mother, Magna Mater, or Shakti, the creatrix. It's all Maya, it's all the overmind. This is already difficult to understand because it is so multi-layered, but we even want to go beyond that. We want to go beyond the overmind is almost all-powerful, but is still limited. What is beyond the overmind has no limits. It is a void or a nihil. It seems to be a nothingness, an abyss of the infinite into which we refuse to look. But it is different. Here in this chapter, even Sri Aurobindo makes some jokes, and here you can see that he has a very, very, very dry sense of humor. He says, it is possible indeed to question the need of positing an infinite which contains our formed universe, although this conception is imperatively demanded by our mind as a necessary basis to its conceptions. For it is unable to fix or assign a limit, whether in space or time, or essential existence beyond which there is nothing, or before or after which there is nothing. Although too the alternative is a void or nihil, which can be only an abyss of the infinite in which we refuse to look. So what does this mean? It means that we cannot other than presuppose that either it is infinite or a void. That thing or being that is beyond Maya, beyond creation, beyond nature, that we want to understand on the path to enlightenment, on the path to the supramental, to beyond the mind. Even that we try to explain that it is either everything, the all and everything, the infinite, or that it is a void, nothing, like in Advaita. We say there's nothing. Both, he jokes here, are limits that we impose by our mind. It's not limit. It's not a limit or limits that are part of the infinite, or whatever we want to call it. And even infinity is something that we cannot comprehend. We have a word for it, but we cannot comprehend. You cannot comprehend something that is infinitely large. It's not possible. Even this idea, for example, of the universe expanding into infinity, we cannot imagine how that would look like. How that started also. He mentions the Big Bang theory here that that is now under question again, but still it's a popular theory that somehow the universe exploded out of a singularity with infinite potential, and out of the infinite potential, this infinite nature, infinite matter has created itself, came into existence, and is expanding even further and further and further, and creating the world through its expansion, not into something, but it's creating itself all the time. And that includes space and time, of course. Sri Aurobindo is also, or has also been, a master of natural science. He has studied physics and chemistry and biology and so on. And so the fundamental characteristics of this universe, as we describe it usually, space and time. And this, of course, is also something that came into existence somehow. That those are also just attributes with which we try to describe nature. Now, in the Vedas and Upanishads, there is this presupposition that Sri Aurobindo talked about in the first book, in the first 28 chapters, that there must be something, some kind of will that drives it all. Why does matter happen? Why does life happen? Why is existence happening? Even behind the life force, even behind consciousness, behind existence, there must be something that somehow wills it all to happen. I will not explain this again, because this is what the first 28 chapters of the first book were about. This thing or being you could also call intent. And it is important to understand here that the overmind, Maya, is not our enemy here. Yes, it is limiting. It sets up certain rules, and part of this is the rule that our mind cannot understand it. But once we have access to faculties that are beyond our mind, we see that even the overmind contains the first direct and masterful knowing of cosmic truth. The overmind is the first entity, although it's not an entity, the first thing that understands what's happening here. Unfortunately, it is stopping us from realizing that. The overmind is like the architect and the oracle in the Matrix movies. So the overmind is the first step that transcends reality. So the question here is, do we as human beings on the path to enlightenment, do we have to pass through the overmind, or can we skip it and go directly to the supermind? Because even the causal world, that is usually what we understand as enlightenment, is below the overmind and cannot understand everything. That's why there are different types of enlightenment, and the usual form of enlightenment is still subject to the laws of the overmind. So what Sri Aurobindo and the Mother have always been trying to reach is something beyond the laws of the overmind, which they call the supramental. Personally, I don't like the term much, supramental, because there's again the mental in there, but that's how they called it. But if the Supreme Absolute is only indeterminable, only unknowable, then there can be no creation, no manifestation, no universe. So there must be some connection. We know the universe exists in some form or another, even if it's all illusion by Maya, by the overmind. Even if that is all there is, then there is illusion. At least there is the dream state. So why, if there is nothing, why is there a dream state then? It doesn't matter if it's physical matter, if it's just a dream. There's something going on. That's enough. And that is our angle here. That is our entry point. That it cannot be pure, indeterminable. It cannot be rigid, and therefore there is a path. And the path is that transcendence and change is part of the whole process. And that is something that many enlightened people quarrel about in one way or another. Some say, no, nothing is happening. It's all the time the same thing again and again. And some say, no, they say that there's an aspect, there is a part of it that is changing, that can change. It's not a changeless entity, an immobile and immutable self-existence. There is some sort of self-awareness, of self-reflection. And somehow that again is our entry point. We as human beings are part of this self-reflective process. Our experience of the world of Maya, and also our spiritual experience of trying to go beyond it, is part of that self-reflection of this indeterminable thingy that we cannot describe, that is beyond even Satchidananda, beyond creation, beyond space and time. So either everything is just a complete error of ignorance, or there's the possibility of us reaching enlightenment and the supramental and going beyond the illusion of Maya. And as Sri Aurobindo has explained already in the first 28 chapters, it's for him indisputable that there is some supreme existence, and it's not an error. So there is a final truth of things, and we can contact it somehow. You may not be able to understand it, but you may contact it, and he calls it the supramental plane, which is an intermediate step from the overmind and mind on the one hand to the complete experience of Satchidananda. And beyond Satchidananda there is something he sometimes calls spirit, and as I said, he refers to it sometimes as a form of being, but only because he lacks the words. It's not a being, it's not a person. It's not a person, but it's also not a blankness, or a negation, or a void, or a nothing, or a nihil. But it is so vast that in essence it is indeterminable, indefinable and inconceivable by the normal mind. It cannot be described, not by giving it more and more and more attributes. Neither can it be described by saying it is not this and is not that. So neither the neti-neti nor the iti-iti is the solution here. We have to go beyond the duality of our normal thinking mind, of our ration. Beyond our ratio, beyond calculation. It's not something that we can quantify or qualify. We can only know that it is. That is the first thing. The first thing we can know and say about it is that it is. It might not even be that we are. Yeah, this cogito ergo sum of Descartes, that can even be a mistake. I think, therefore I am. Or Chet McKenna's I sense, I perceive, therefore I am. Even that can be an illusion. But something is there. And that's enough for now. There's something we can give names to, like Brahman, Purusha, Ishvara, Maya, Prakriti, Shakti. It doesn't matter. It is there. That's the important thing for now. And that is the conclusion of the first chapter of the first part of the first book. In very, very simple words. At least I hope so. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that others can find the channel as well. The YouTube algorithm likes it if you give a comment or like or subscribe. And thank you for joining me as a patron, and thank you to all my patrons, and see you soon.